The perfect beginning. Amora had always dreamed of a love that would stand the test of time, and when she met Obinna, she believed she had found it. He was kind, strong, and full of laughter. Their love was like the sun shining after a heavy storm, warm, bright, and full of hope. Their wedding was a grand celebration, filled with music, dancing, and the blessings of friends and family. Amora felt like the luckiest woman alive as she stood beside Obinna, promising to love him forever. She believed that her new life would be beautiful. But every love story has its trials. From the moment Amora stepped into Obinna's family home as his wife, she could feel an invisible wall between her and her mother-in-law, Mama Ife. The older woman smiled when others were watching, but her eyes told a different story, cold, sharp, and filled with something Amora could not name. At first, Amora tried to believe it was just her imagination. Mama Ife had lost her husband years ago and had raised Obinna on her own. Maybe she was just protective of her only son. Maybe, with time, things would get better. But time did not bring change, it only made things worse. Mama Ife would always find something wrong with what Amora did. "You don't wake up early enough," she complained one morning. So, Amora started waking up before dawn, sweeping the yard and preparing breakfast. "You don't know how to dress properly for a wife," Mama Ife said another day, eyeing Amora's simple yet elegant wrapper. Amora changed her style, wearing the traditional dresses Mama Ife seemed to favor. Still, nothing was enough. The worst came when it was time for Amora to cook. Let me taste the soup," Mama Ife would say, lifting a spoonful to her lips. Every time, she would frown and shake her head. Too much salt. The next day, Amora used less salt. Too bland, Mama Ife declared, pushing the bowl away. No matter what Amora did, the food was always too salty, too watery, too spicy, or too tasteless. At first, Obinna would laugh and say, "Mama, let her learn. She's still new to our way of cooking." But as the days passed, he started sighing when his mother complained. Then, he started agreeing with her. "Maybe you should watch how Mama does it," he told Amora one evening. "She has been cooking for years, after all." Amora's heart sank, but she nodded. She wanted peace. But peace was the one thing she would never have in that house. One evening, after spending hours preparing a delicious meal, Amora placed the food in front of Mama Ife, her heart hopeful. Mama Ife tasted it and immediately spat it out. "What kind of nonsense is this?" she shouted. "Are you trying to poison me?" Amora's hands shook. "Mama, please, taste it again. I promise, it's good." Mama Ife pushed the bowl away as if it was filled with poison. "Take this away from me." Just then, Obinna walked in. "What's wrong, Mama?" "Your wife cannot cook to save her life." Obinna sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Amora, maybe we should just eat out tonight." Tears pricked Amora's eyes, but she forced a smile. "Yes, that's fine." But it wasn't fine. As Obinna and Mama Ife left for the restaurant, Amora sat alone at the table, staring at the untouched food. She had tried so hard, but it was never enough. She didn't know that this was only the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. The silent war begins. Amora had never felt such happiness before. She stared at the small paper in her hands, the test results from the hospital. She was pregnant. A new life was growing inside her, a symbol of her love with Obinna. She imagined the look on his face when she told him. He would lift her in his arms, spinning her around in excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this child would finally bring them together. Maybe it would soften Mama Ife's heart. But she had no idea that this pregnancy would become the weapon that tore everything apart. For the past few weeks, Mama Ife had been watching Amora carefully. The way her face glowed, the way she seemed lost in thought, the secret smiles she gave when she thought no one was looking, Mama Ife noticed it all. "She is hiding something," she told Obinna one evening as they sat in the living room. Obinna frowned. "Mama, what do you mean?" "Your wife," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a dark secret. "She's been acting strange. And I've seen a man visiting her when you're not home." Obinna's face hardened. "A man?" Mama Ife nodded. "Yes, a tall, young man." They whisper to each other. "She even takes him into the bedroom." Obinna's heart pounded. "Who is he?" "I don't know," Mama Ife said, shaking her head. "But, my son, you must open your eyes. A woman who has nothing to hide does not sneak around." Obinna clenched his fist. He had always trusted Amora, but doubt had been planted in his mind. That evening, Amora sat in the bedroom, waiting for Obinna to return. She had set up a small surprise, a plate of his favorite meal, candlelight, and the test result hidden under a small gift box. But Obinna came home late. When he finally entered the room, his face was cold. He didn't even glance at the table. "Where were you?" Amora asked, standing up. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" he shot back. She frowned. "What do you mean? Who was here today?" Amora blinked. "No one," she paused. "Oh. Chijioke came to see me." "You remember my cousin, Chijioke?" Obinna's jaw tightened. "Your cousin?" "Yes," Amora said, confused. "He came to check on me. We sat in the living room and talked." Mama Ife suddenly appeared at the door, her arms crossed. "You see, my son. She is lying. I saw them enter the bedroom together." Amora's mouth fell open. "That's not true." "Mama, why would you say such a thing?" Mama Ife scoffed. "Are you calling me a liar?" Obinna turned to his mother. "You saw them enter the bedroom." "With my own eyes," she said firmly. "Obinna, please," Amora begged. "You know me. Chijioke is my cousin. Why would I?" "Enough!" Obinna shouted, his eyes flashing with anger. "How do I even know this child is mine?" Amora froze. The room seemed to spin around her. You think I would do that?" Her voice broke. "Can you prove me wrong?" he asked coldly. Tears streamed down her face. She reached for the small gift box on the table. "Look, I wanted to surprise you. I went to the hospital today, and..." But before she could finish, Obinna shoved the box aside. It fell to the ground, and the small paper inside fluttered out. Obinna didn't even look at it. He stormed out of the room, leaving Amora trembling, her hands cradling her belly. She had never felt so alone. And she had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The unforgivable act. Amora sat on the bed, her heart pounding in her chest. She could still hear Obinna's angry voice echoing in her ears, his cold, accusing words cutting through her like a sharp blade. The small piece of paper, the proof of her pregnancy, lay forgotten on the floor. She had reached for it, desperate to show him the truth, but he had walked away without even looking. Tears streamed down her face. She had never imagined that the man she loved, the man she had promised to spend her life with, would doubt her so easily. But it wasn't just Obinna. It was Mama Ife. She had poisoned his mind against her, turning the love between them into something ugly and bitter. Amora wrapped her arms around herself, cradling her stomach. "My baby," she whispered, as if speaking to the tiny life inside her could bring her comfort. She needed to fix this. She needed to make Obinna see the truth before it was too late. The next evening, Amora heard the front door slam. Obinna was home. She ran to him, her heart aching with hope. "Obinna, please," she said, reaching for his hand. You need to listen to me. Chijioke is my cousin. I would never. Enough, he roared, his eyes burning with rage. Do you take me for a fool? Amora flinched. No, Obinna, I swear. His hands clenched into fists. My mother saw you. Do you think she would lie? She took a deep breath. Yes, she cried. She would lie. She hates me, Obinna. She has always hated me. His eyes darkened. How dare you speak about my mother like that? Because it's the truth. Amora sobbed. She is trying to destroy us. Obinna's jaw tightened. Then, without warning, he shoved her. Amora stumbled backward, her foot catching on the rug. The world seemed to move in slow motion as she lost her balance. She tried to grab something, anything, to steady herself. But there was nothing. She crashed to the ground. A sharp pain shot through her stomach. A scream tore from her lips. And then, the pain turned into something worse. Something unbearable. A warm wetness spread beneath her. She gasped, her hands trembling as she touched the blood pooling on the floor. Obinna's face twisted in horror. Amora. His voice was barely a whisper. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The pain swallowed her whole, dragging her into darkness. When Amora woke up, the room was white and cold. The steady beeping of a machine filled her ears. The scent of antiseptic burned her nose. She blinked slowly, her vision blurry. A nurse was standing beside her, adjusting the fall in her arm. You're awake, the nurse said gently. Amora's lips felt dry. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw. My baby, she croaked. The nurse's face fell. Amora's heart stopped. No, she whispered. I'm so sorry, the nurse said softly. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. Her baby was gone. She turned her head, staring at the ceiling, her mind numb. How could this have happened? How could Obinna do this to her? And where was he? She turned to the door, hoping, praying that he would walk in. That he would say he was sorry. That he would hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But he never came. Obinna sat in the living room, his head in his hands. He had hurt Amora. He had hurt their child. The image of her falling, the blood on the floor, it haunted him. And yet, he could not bring himself to go to the hospital. His mother sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. You did what you had to do, my son, she said calmly. A woman who betrays her husband does not deserve mercy. Obinna squeezed his eyes shut. But what if she was telling the truth? Mama Ife scoffed. Are you seriously doubting me now? I saw it with my own eyes. She was with that man in your bedroom. Obinna's hands trembled. Had he made the worst mistake of his life? At the hospital, Chijioke stormed into Amora's room, his face filled with rage. I swear I will kill him, he growled. Amora shook her head weakly. No, Chijioke. It won't bring my baby back. But he needs to know the truth. He won't listen, she whispered. Tears filled Chijioke's eyes. Then I will make him listen. Amora didn't stop him as he turned and walked out. She had nothing left to fight for, the dark truth comes to light. Amora sat by the hospital window, staring outside. The world continued as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything was different. She had lost her child. And she had lost the man she once loved. The doctors had told her she could be discharged soon, but she had no home to return to. She would never step foot in that house again. Not after what Obinna had done. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Chijioke. His face was tight with anger, his jaw clenched. I found something, he said. Amora turned to him, confused. What do you mean? Chijioke sat beside her. Mama Ife, is Pat. She planned everything, Amora. She wanted to destroy your marriage from the start. Amora's chest tightened. But why? Because she never wanted you to marry Obinna, Chijioke said. She thinks you are beneath him. She wanted him to marry someone else, someone she could control. Tears welled up in Amora's eyes. She had suspected that Mama Ife didn't like her, but to go this far. Chijioke took out his phone. I have proof. I spoke to one of the housemates. She overheard Mama Ife plotting. And I have recordings of her telling a friend how she tricked Obinna into believing you were unfaithful. Amora's hands shook as she took the phone. She pressed play. Mama Ife's voice filled the room. Obinna is a fool. I only had to tell him what he wanted to hear. I knew he would believe me. And the wife, another voice asked. She will suffer. She will live, and my son will finally find a woman worthy of him. Amora felt like she couldn't breathe. Chijioke clenched his fist. We are going to Obinna with this. He has to hear it. Amora hesitated. She had no desire to see Obinna again. But he needed to know the truth. Fine, she whispered. Let's go. Obinna sat in the living room, drowning in regret. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. His mind kept replaying the moment Amora fell. The blood. The pain in her eyes. And worst of all, the truth that gnawed at his heart. What if she had been telling the truth all along? A loud knock at the door startled him. When he opened it, his heart nearly stopped. Amora stood there. Pale, thin, but standing. Behind her was Chijioke, his expression cold. What are you doing here? Obinna asked, his voice hoarse. We need to talk, Chijioke said, stepping inside. Mama Ife walked into the room. The moment she saw Amora and Chijioke, her eyes darkened. What is she doing here? She hissed. Amora looked at her with nothing but emptiness. Chijioke, play it. Chijioke pulled out his phone and pressed play. Mama Ife's voice filled the room. Obinna stiffened. His eyes darted between Amora and his mother. What is this? You tell me, Chijioke snapped. Your mother lied. She destroyed your marriage. She killed your child with her wickedness. Obinna's face turned pale. He turned to his mother. Mama, his voice wavered. Tell me this isn't true. Mama Ife folded her arms. And if it is, she said coldly. Obinna took a step back. You lied to me. I did what was best for you, she said. That girl was never meant for you. Obinna's stomach twisted. He turned to Amora, his eyes filled with guilt. Amora, Don't, Amora cut him off. Her voice was quiet, but firm. You believed her over me. You didn't trust me. And because of that, I lost my baby. Obinna's knees felt weak. Please, Amora. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, she said. You let her poison your mind. You let her turn you into a monster. Obinna reached for her, but she stepped back. I can never forgive you, she whispered. His heart shattered. Amora, please. She turned and walked away. And this time, she wasn't coming back. The mother's curse. Mama Ife sat in her room, staring at the walls. The house felt empty. Obinna had not spoken to her in days. She had won, hadn't she? Amora was gone. Her son was free. Yet, instead of victory, she felt a growing unease. Then, the nightmares began. Every night, she dreamed of a baby crying. A soft wail, distant at first, but growing louder and louder until it filled the whole room. She would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart racing. Then came the whispers. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks on her. But every night, just before she slept, she heard them. You caused this. You destroyed your own blood. Your hands are stained. She covered her ears, but the voices never stopped. Then, her body began to fail her. One morning, as she got out of bed, her legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, unable to move. The healers were called. They chanted. They burned herbs. But their faces were grim. One of the elders shook his head. This is no ordinary illness, he said. You have committed a great sin. Mama Ife scoffed, but her hands trembled. What sin? The elder's eyes bore into hers. A mother who destroys her own child's happiness will never know peace. Mama Ife's throat went dry. The elder continued. The ancestors are watching. The spirits of the unborn do not rest easily when taken by wickedness. Mama Ife's heart pounded. Could it be true? She turned to Obinna for comfort. But her son only looked at her with cold eyes. This is your doing, he said. His words hit her like a slap. You turned me against my own wife, he continued. You made me lose my child. And now you want my pity. Mama Ife's lips trembled. Obinna, I did it for you. No. Obinna roared. His voice shook the walls. You did it for yourself. And now I have lost everything. Tears streamed down Mama Ife's face. But Obinna had no more kindness left for her. He turned and walked away. Meanwhile, Amora sat by the river, watching the water ripple under the evening sun. She had left the past behind. She had grieved. She had healed. And now, she was ready to begin again. A gentle breeze kissed her skin, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled. She had lost much, but she had not lost herself. And that was enough. Redemption and justice. Obinna stood outside Amora's new home, his hands trembling. It had been months since she left. Months of sleepless nights, of regret eating at his soul. He knocked. When the door opened, Amora stood before him, her face calm, her posture strong. She no longer looked like the broken woman he had once left in the hospital. She was different now. Stronger. Wiser. Amora, Obinna's voice cracked. Please. I need to talk to you. Amora studied him for a long moment before stepping aside. Inside, the silence between them was heavy. I was wrong, he finally said. I let my mother poison my mind. I let my anger destroy everything. Amora listened but did not speak. I killed our child, Obinna whispered. His voice was barely above a breath. I cannot change the past, but I beg you, please forgive me. A long pause stretched between them. Then, Amora spoke, her voice steady. I have forgiven you, Obinna. His eyes widened in hope. But I will never go back to you. His face fell. Amora, please. She raised a hand. No. I lost too much because of you. But I refuse to lose myself. Tears filled his eyes. I love you. Amora smiled, but it was not the smile of a woman still in love. I loved you too, she said. But love is not enough without trust and respect. Obinna lowered his head. He had lost her forever. And he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, Mama Ife lay on a mat in the village square, her body frail, her breathing shallow. The elders stood around her. You have wronged not just Amora, one of them said. You have wronged the ancestors. Mama Ife's lips trembled. What must I do? You must confess your sins, another elder said. You must atone before it is too late. And so, with a weak voice, Mama Ife told the truth. She admitted to her jealousy. She admitted to her lies. She admitted that her hatred had caused the death of her own grandchild. The villagers murmured, shaking their heads in disgust. The elders handed her a bowl of cleansing water, but before she could drink, her hands shook violently. The bowl slipped from her grasp. The water spilled onto the ground. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It is too late, one elder whispered. The ancestors had already passed judgment. Mama Ife let out a weak cry as her body stiffened. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, she was gone. Months later, Amora stood before a group of young women, her eyes filled with warmth. She had started a new life. A life dedicated to helping women who had been betrayed, just as she had been. She had turned her pain into strength. Her past no longer defined her. She was free. And as the sun set behind her, she knew she had won. Not by revenge. Not by hatred. But by choosing herself. By choosing peace. By choosing a future where no one would ever silence her again. The end.